Welcome, everybody. I'm Sherri Snelling, the ambassador for Caregiver Monday, and I am thrilled to have our next guest, Dr. Scott Kaiser, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for the Motion Picture and Television Fund. And Scott is one of our great thought leaders in aging and caregiving, and here to talk to us tonight about a really important topic that we know is happening both with older adults, but also with their family caregivers. So Scott, welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Sherri.
Sure. So I want to kick this off. You've done so much great work and have actually put out a report recently around the impact of social isolation and loneliness, particularly in older adults, and the negative health impact that can have. So first of all, tell us, what's the difference, or is there a difference between social isolation and loneliness?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking on this topic. Just, understanding the impact that this has, particularly on caregivers. I just feel that we have to do more to raise the profile of this issue and let people know that they're not alone, right?
Right.
And really work together. Because when you think about loneliness or isolation, really the solutions come through connection. But they are different. So as you pointed out, loneliness is more of a subjective feeling. It's I think of it like thirst or hunger. When you're thirsty, you're craving fluids, or hunger, craving food intake, right? Loneliness is craving social connection, right? So feeling alone. So you could be in a room full of people. You could be in a relationship, a full house. You could have lots of friends, you go to church, all sorts of group activities, and still feel lonely. That feeling like you don't have any meaningful connection with somebody, like you just are craving, you don't have somebody you can confide in, those kinds of things. So that's loneliness. And then social isolation is a more objective, quantifiable factor. Either you're isolated or you're connected, and there's a whole spectrum in between. And you can actually look at how many contacts you have and the kinds of contacts you have with other people. For the work I do, I'm a geriatrician. I specialize in the care of older people, and I spend a lot of time thinking about population health across retiree populations. The isolation piece is that picture of, retiree who might be mostly homebound and go weeks without talking to another person, which is heartbreaking. But different from that feeling of loneliness. So two different factors, and both have huge impacts on our health and well-being.
Right. Well, and thank you for explaining the difference. I love that analogy that you make with loneliness being kind of like craving food or craving, water if you're thirsty, because it really is a health issue to be lonely or to be feeling socially isolated. So tell us a little bit more about those negative impacts to our health when we have this ongoing sense of feeling not connected to other people.
Sure. So, first of all, I want to give credit where credit is due. I borrow that analogy of thirst and hunger from Julianne Holt-Lunstead, who's an amazing researcher who studies relationships and the impact of relationships on health. She's really a pioneer, amazing contributor to the field. And, my focus is on taking care of people, both in the direct clinical setting or again, across populations, but she's really an expert in the area. And I got that. But, the reason that I started thinking about this so much, it's very intuitive. When I was in, seeing patients, I'm trying to think about what will help them live well and age well, and having meaningful connection and thriving relationships. That's just something you want anyway, right? So it's something that I think intuitively was something that I would try and help patients achieve, and make sure that was an important part of their health and well-being kind of portfolio. But what really woke me up to this was I was at a conference, and one of my colleagues, Dr. Carla Perissinotto, she presented a paper where she looked at a large retiree health data set And she compared loneliness, because that was one of the factors that they asked these retirees about. And people who were chronically lonely had higher risk of functional decline, meaning not being able to do things independently, higher risk of other health issues, and even a higher risk of premature mortality than compared to other traditional risk factors that we think a lot about, like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity. I mean, that was really revelatory to think, oh my gosh, here's something that, I don't know when the last time somebody went to the doctor and that was the they certainly checked their blood pressure every time, but did they really do an assessment of their relationships and how they're feeling and their social network? That's not really standard practice. And if you really look at the data and you look at how much it impacts the things we care about, being able to live well and thrive and maintain independence and remain at home and live long, full lives, this is one of the secret ingredients in the secret sauce. And it's just something that should not be overlooked or ignored.
Well, and it's interesting. I know you mentioned Juliet Holt-Lonstead. I think, was she the one, her research found that chronic loneliness can be the equivalent of smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, which we all know is bad for our health, right?
Right. I mean, it was unbelievable, that widely quoted statistic about 15 cigarettes a day. And that's really, so being social isolation has negative health impacts equivalent to smoking, on par with 15 cigarettes a day. Now, one very sharp person asked me one time when I was giving a presentation, he said, so what about if you smoke with all your friends, smoke with a group of friends? Does that mitigate? But all kidding aside, it's really striking. She did this amazing research where she looked at, it's a study of studies, a meta-analysis, study of studies, and compared all of these factors across studies and looked at things like air pollution, obesity, smoking, and really showed the outsized impact that social connection or lack thereof has. And that's really driven the conversation, an overdue conversation that thankfully is really heating up now, about recognizing the nature of our social networks and our social relationships and our feeling of connection as a critical public health issue. So I started out talking about, a health issue, thinking about high blood pressure, how we measure and we check the blood pressure with a blood pressure cuff, all that. Well, public health, smoking, physical activity, air quality. What about community and connection and social connectivity? If you really look just at the data, that's something we should be focusing on and investing in. And thankfully, we've had some amazing champions of that thought process and that approach. For example, the former Surgeon General and perhaps soon to be again Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, who wrote a book about the impact of loneliness and isolation and the importance of social connectivity. And we, it's overdue. There's been a silent pandemic, or silent epidemic, and really need not be silent anymore. Everybody is tuning in and should be.
Right. And it's so great to hear. And Scott, I know that obviously as a geriatrician and working with a lot of older adults, you realize there's more than just the physical health that makes us healthy and well. It is that holistic look at our social connections, our mental health, our emotional health, which are so important. And, what's interesting is that as we age, we do start to lose some of those connections. And whether it's because, the loss of a loved one or a friend, or we have, we're moving maybe to be closer to immediate family, but we don't have that social circle anymore. So there's a lot of different factors, I think. And so tell our audience, in terms of what they should be thinking about with their older loved ones, how, the importance of this social connection. And then what I'd like you to do is tell us a little bit about what Motion Picture and Television Fund does, because you guys, Tell us about your organization. You've done so much great work in this space, really keeping older adults connected and recognizing how important that is. And I just think it's wonderful work. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, you gave me a lot of great questions in one there. So, and I'm excited to talk about all of them. So feel free to cut me off at any point, but I'm going to go for it all basically, because, I get so passionate about this. So one, the changing nature of our social networks and our relationships as we get older. So it's not all loss, first of all. It's true. So there are factors like leaving the workforce, maybe losing the ability to drive, loss of a loved one, bereavement. There are factors that can contribute to people's social isolation. But I want to point out that loneliness and isolation is something that is being experienced at rising rates across generations. In fact, some of the younger generations are the ones most impacted, right? And our relationships and our networks change as we age. The amazing work of Laura Carstensen out of Stanford, and the idea of socio-emotional selectivity theory, the fact that we might have less social connections as we get older, but we tend to focus on the more meaningful social connections that really sustain us and fulfill us.
I think didn't she call it pruning? We prune our
Oh,
relationships
nice.
to have the best quality, kind of like if you have a garden, you're pruning your rose bushes to have the most beautiful rose bushes out there.
I love that. Yeah, yeah. And I think about where she looked at people. I think one study example was in people who had been directly involved with the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks, a traumatic experience, but looking at people who've been through life-changing traumatic experiences, and actually their social networks, they also pruned their social networks, but then it wore off, right? And then they went back, after a couple years, they went back to normal. And I just like to point that out because I think that there's that sort of enlightenment of age can dawn upon all of us sometimes, but we can lose it. And we can always tend to focus on all the loss and negativity, but there's also a strengthening, enforcing kind of building component too. So that's sort of the one aspect of, yes, there are factors, but this is something that can be experienced across generations, is being experienced across generations. There are particular age-related risk factors that can drive isolation and loneliness. The other thing that I think is important, why I do focus on chronic isolation and loneliness in older people, is that the consequences are different and what you can do about it is different, right? So it can be very much an impactful driver of poor or good health, if we look on either side of the equation, right? So on the one hand, this gets to the second thing that you brought up about health is terms of physical health, social health, mental health, health and well-being as this whole person composite thing. Well, there is a constant interplay between all of these factors. And if anything, what the data and expertise shows us is that the social and emotional components to health actually have the outsized impact. And if anything, they're driving physical health more than the other way around, right? So the whole person, you can't think about healthy aging without thinking about the whole person approach. And when people lean in and ask me, okay, what's the secret that 110-year-old woman just bounced out of your waiting room, looking like she was 20, what's the secret? And it turns out it is things like robust social connections, strong sense of purpose, a lot of creative engagement and opportunities for fulfillment, our own perceptions and thoughts about aging. So that's really sort of where the money is, so to speak, right? That's really what's going to have the impact in terms of overall health and well-being. And more often than not, that drives physical health outcomes like blood pressure, even cognition, right? We look at the social isolation as a risk factor for dementia. But so there's that. But then The other thing that I'd like to mention when you talk whole person is here we are on Caregiver Monday and bringing this all together, whole person, the factors that drive. We know that being a caregiver is a tremendous gift and can also cause tremendous strain. That it's a mixed package. And we know that becoming a caregiver is one of those things that can increase people's risk of becoming chronically isolated and or lonely, right? So it's very important that caregivers know to reach for that tool of connection, to monitor that in themselves, to make sure that if they want to be in a good position to maintain their health and well-being and help support the health and well-being of their loved one, that focusing on their social connectivity is really crucial.
Right. And
Right.
that's so important. I love that thought because, in a lot of ways, caregivers are they're presenting the kind of interactions that they hope their older loved ones and their younger loved ones have, right? We want to make sure that people around us, the people that we love, see that no, you don't have to give things up like, friends and getting together or staying connected. And that's important for all ages. So I think you're right. I think for
Yeah.
caregivers, we often, that's the thing that kind of goes because we just don't have the time or we don't believe we have the time. But it's critical both for our older loved ones to see we're still engaged and they should be as well, and also for the younger generation too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the caregiver becomes that central point in the social network for others in their life, and and needs to think about their social network as well. And so that comes to the final question that you had there about the work we've been doing at MPTF is sort of recognizing this, that our whole purpose is to support our community in living well and aging well, members of our broader entertainment industry community and living and aging well with dignity and purpose. And that means a whole person approach. That means caregivers are the center of our universe, right? And when it became so clear how important healthy social connection and meaningful social connection are, we really did an inventory of everything that we're doing at MPTF to say, how is this promoting social connectivity? Everything we do, we wonder, how is it promoting social connectivity? And we saw that there was an opportunity to build upon the great work of our volunteer programs and really just get out there and reach out, expand our net. So we focused a lot on cultivating a group of volunteers who make regular social calls to people. We have a program we call the Daily Call Sheet, and it's been wonderful. We have hundreds of people receiving calls from hundreds of volunteers on a regular basis. Tens of thousands of calls per year, and this is not calling to say, are you okay? Do you have your meds? It's not a check-in call. This is calling. It's not a medical intervention. This is just calling to connect and giving people a really wonderful, stress-free, relaxed, unencumbered opportunity to connect. And it's amazing that when you give people this chance to connect, they connect. And there's so much that people have in common. In this case, people are able really to connect because they're part of this industry community, and they might have worked in similar places, known similar people, whatever. But sometimes it's just that people have a passion for fishing or something, and this becomes this connection to be able to sustain. And the final thing I'll say about that is, as you can imagine, it becomes a fine line who gets more out of it, this so-called volunteer caller or the so-called call recipient. It's just a win-win where everybody gets a sense of purpose, a sense of connection, which are really two things that go hand in hand. And again, are those secret ingredients to keeping us healthy and well, particularly for healthy longevity.
Yes, and you recently had a conference. It was a virtual conference where you talked about that, and that really struck me that the volunteers are getting as much, if not even more, out of those calls and those connections. And I think that goes back to this kind of thought around generativity, right? That older people still have so much they can share, wisdom, experience, that's really enlightening, I think, for younger generations, and that making those connections and then being able to learn from younger generations. So it's really vital to have that, intergenerational kind of activity. And you guys have done fabulous work in that area. It's just been really wonderful. I also wanted to note that you made a really important comment, and I think it's important for our caregivers. So on the older adult side, we shouldn't look at it as a time of decay and decline and disease, because it can be one of the most, wonderful times of life when you, are thinking about all these wonderful things that you've done through life and all the things you still want to do. That passion and purpose is still there. And for family caregivers, you and I have talked before about they're really the heroes in our society, and they don't get as much recognition probably as they should, but telling those stories and also recognizing the wonderful work that they do and the skills that they're building as caregivers that can help them in other areas of their life. So I appreciate your comments there, and it's really important. Let's talk a little bit about, we're going into the holidays. We're in the midst of it right now, I think. And in fact, I think tonight is the first night of Hanukkah. So we want to say, hello to all of our friends out there in the Jewish faith. But, with the social distancing and what we've had to do to stay safe during COVID, we have had to feel a little bit more isolated from our loved ones. What are the things that we can do to make that connection still feel like it's there, particularly through the holidays when we really do feel that sense of wanting to be with family and wanting to be with loved ones?
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we talk about the holidays, let's just talk about the impact that COVID has had on social connectivity, right? So that's been very hard. I mean, this has been a very difficult time. Social distancing, probably not the best name for what's really physical distancing. And, stay-at-home orders. And I've been telling my cautious, prudent patients to stay home well before there were stay-at-home orders, right? To keep themselves safe. Literally, it's a matter of life and death. Physically cutting ourselves off from other people here to protect our lives. And it's reflected in the studies. The rates of loneliness and isolation have gone up dramatically. And that is very hard. But again, so physical distancing doesn't need to be social disconnection. We have so many ways that we have to prioritize connection and leverage technology. Think about, those who are in our immediate network, and just be very sensitive to those needs. The other thing that I'll say about how hard COVID has been is that, caregivers, I mean, that's what I'm dealing with every day. I'm talking to patients, I'm talking to people in our community who are, really struggling, that they're working so hard to keep their loved ones safe. They have gut-wrenching decisions that they need to make every day about whether some kind of contact or connection is worth the risk, whether it's for a certain medical thing or whether it's visiting someone somewhere. And, it's really takes a toll. So within all that and going into the holidays, I do really try and prioritize people staying safe in terms of understanding how you can protect yourself from spreading or becoming infected by an infectious disease, right? So I think following all those guidelines is really paramount. That's where I start. Once you come up with a good game plan to keep yourself safe, and knowing that holidays are going to have to be different, that sacrifices might need to be made, or things just need to be, new this year, right? Then I think it's really important to think about ways that we can connect. And that's why we've been not only growing our daily call sheet, but we've partnered with organizations across the United States to launch these social call programs. And you can You can learn more from our conference, as you mentioned. You can go pull up the Milken Institute Center for the Future of Aging Together Apart report, which summarizes a lot of the elements of our summit, and also includes some call to action of things that we can do more on an organizational level. And we've launched these trainings and these support programs for other organizations across the country. And you can go to joincallhub.com, joincallhub.com, and you can learn about a new system we've created to support social call programs everywhere. And so we're partnering with Meals on Wheels programs, senior centers, faith-based groups, caregiver groups, to get these social call programs out there so that everybody can make a call, receive a call, make and receive a call, right? And connect and find these healthy ways to connect. And again, it's just, there's something really special about having this ability to just have somebody where it's not a medical intervention, it's not necessarily a family member, it's just another, it's like a low maintenance friend, that you can just connect with. And so we've actually, you mentioned intergenerational connection. We were funded by the Eisner Foundation, which is the only foundation that exclusively focuses on supporting intergenerational connection, so any caregivers out there should Google Eisner Foundation. They're just incredible. And so they provided funding to us to build out this software, which you can learn about at our joincallhub.com website. And we now have this software to support social call programs, and we have thousands of people making calls and have built this software so that it can just grow and grow and grow, and hopefully be the beginning of a movement, an overdue movement that is critical to our public health.
Well, I love that. I love that idea because the connection is something I think we're all feeling that we need. And whether that connection is with our own families or, as you said, creating these new friendships, it's so powerful. And I think about, the 1,000 points of light kind of concept, but we can all be one of those little lights in this whole universe and bring some of that to each other. So that's wonderful. And thank you for sharing where people can find out more information. We'll make sure that we put that up on our site as well. And, going back to the caregivers, one of the things, of course, of Caregiver Monday is that we're really trying to promote when you give yourself the gift of time, when you focus just on yourself, and whether that means connecting with somebody, because that's important and that's your gift, but, make sure you do it more often than just like a vacation once a year. That's why the whole every Monday, think about what am I going to do this week to make those connections or find that time for myself. I love the daily caller because it is, it's a daily kind of little break. So I think these little prompts are really important. And I know that you've seen great success and had great response, from the programs. I don't know if there's any anecdotal stories you want to share, but,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm looking here at the background where you say Caregiver Monday encourages caregivers to set aside time every Monday to focus on taking care of themselves. And I'm sure everybody who's ever come on your program here has talked about, that oxygen mask, and when there's a drop in cabin pressure, you got to put your oxygen mask on before assisting others. And I mean, that's something I talk about with patients and families every day. And yet I don't necessarily think about that in my own life. People, in my caregiver roles, I forget. And that's why we all have to nudge each other and we all have to help each other, right? It's a lot easier when you're looking from the outside, and it's just not easy. I mean, I'm sort of losing the words here, but to just say that I know how challenging it can be. We've lived it, right? And why not? We get so much out of helping each other, and helping our loved ones become such a part of our identity as well, that, it's just really great. I guess what I'm trying to say is I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm glad that I see that message up on the board there. And I'm going to remind myself that, and I look forward to taking my breaks on Monday with this community to remember to stop and, take care of ourselves.
Right.
And I wish that was a message that was more mainstream. Thanks to you, it will be. I wish that was a message that you got every time you went to see the doctor, that you just got loud and clear how you're the most important, you're the VIP as the caregiver, you're the most important person here. You know your loved one better than anybody. You're the one who can make the most difference in your life and their life, and you have to prioritize your health and well-being for the whole thing to work. The whole thing really rests upon exactly what you're doing, and I love that you're doing it in a way that's about bringing together a community. That's all we're trying to do with Call Hub, with Daily Call Sheet. Everything is about building strength and resilience in community.
Right.
Because if the last however many months and the experience of the pandemic and all sorts of political and civil, change, if it's taught us anything, it's that we are all connected. It is just basically a fundamental reality truth, is that no man is an island unto himself.
Right.
We are all connected.
Yes.
And let's use that for good.
Absolutely. I'll share just quickly. I talked to a caregiver today, and she was sharing with me that she really loves, BBC mysteries. And she really had to take a step back from watching a lot of the shows and everything when she became a caregiver for her husband. So when I asked her, well, what are you doing? She said, I got inspired by Caregiver Monday. And she said, so now I go into another room, I stream just 30 minutes of a program, but she said, I do it on Mondays, and I so look forward to that all week. She goes, it keeps me going all week long to know that I'm going to get to watch a little bit of my favorite mystery. So I think if we can find these little, and so she and I connected because I also love the BBC mysteries. So, we now have a little sharing of, okay, what are you watching now? So you're right. You can spontaneous connections that come out of this, sense of what can we do to help each other find that me time. I love that concept. So, well, Scott, I just want to, I don't know if you have a final thought for our audience. Again, just this idea that, we have to look at older adults as such an important part of our society, and giving back, so much of that wonderful, as we talked about, that wisdom. It's not a time of decline. And caregivers need to really think about what can they do to stay strong for their loved ones and for themselves. And any final thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, the final thought would be connection matters, right? I mean, connection matters. I don't think that people are going to get that message enough when they go to the doctor's office, or, when they're looking through their medication list, thinking through their healthy aging game plan. But connection matters. It's a fundamental component of good health and well-being. And, that's a wonderful thing, because when I talk with people about what matters most to them and what they really value, and when whether they have good health or poor health, and, they're thinking about, what drives them, what matters, more often than not, it's relationships, it's social connections. That's what is most profoundly valuable in the end, right? And so I think that, hopefully we can support each other's efforts to build meaningful connection, build strong communities. I'm excited. I'm encouraged by the way that people are taking this Call Hub platform. That we have great partners like the Eisner Foundation who've supported this work, and to see these organizations and know that there are people who are day and night working 24/7 to keep us safe from COVID, to help treat people who are infected, help save lives, to help keep people connected. I mean, the real heroes out there who run senior centers and meals programs, who've had to shut their doors and yet still are tirelessly finding a way to make sure that caregivers have the lifelines they need, that their loved ones have the services that we all rely upon. Thank goodness that each of those people wake up every day knowing that connection matter, that relationships matter, and that they're just putting themselves out there to do good for others. I mean, that's, I guess, it's a time that, as hard as it's been, many of us have lost people and are going through hard times now. There's also been an amazing opportunity for gratitude. And I'm just so grateful for all of the wonderful things that people are doing as caregivers to care for each other and to really build the kinds of communities that we all need to live well and thrive.
Well, I think you hit it. The themes, I think, particularly during this season, is gratitude and connection. You're so right. And, let's give ourselves that gift of connecting. I want to say that I'm grateful to you, first of all, for coming on and doing this. I know that it's the end of your day and, you've had so much going on, busy days, but we're really grateful. And I'm grateful to you for the connection we've had over the years and for your support of things like Caregiver Monday and all the great work that you're doing. And again, tell us the URL again where people can find more information about getting involved.
Sure. Joincallhub.com, joincallhub.com, and of course, mptf.com to learn more about our organization and the work we do within the entertainment industry community. And check out our Together Apart collaboration with the Milken Institute Center for the Future of Aging. So many things. And again, I'm just going to add to that list when I go out there to Eisner and MPTF, Caregiver Monday. And I'm all in for Caregiver Monday. So thank you for your leadership on this.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, again, we are so honored to have you on tonight and to share your great message with our audience. And we wish you and your family a wonderful holiday season and take care.
Thank you so much. Same to you.